The Assembly is now in session. Assemblymember Cooper notices the absence of a quorum. The Sergeants at Arms will prepare the chamber and bring in the absent members, and the clerk will call the roll.
Ashajian, Alejo, Allen, Atkins, Baker, Bigelow, Bloom, Bonilla, Bonta, Bro, Brown, Burke, Calderon, Campos, Chang, Chow, Chavez, David Chu, Canton Chu, Cooley, Cooper, Dababne, Daly, Daly, Dodd, Eggman, Frazier, Gaines, Gallagher, Christina Garcia, Eduardo Garcia, Gatto, Gibson, Gomez, Gonzalez, Gordon, Gray, Grove, Hadley, Harper, Hernandez, Holden, Irwin, Jones, Jones Sawyer, Kim, Lackey, Levine, Linder, Lopez, Lowe, Mainshine, Mathis, Mays, McCarty, Medina, Melendez, Mullen, Nazarian, Obernolte, O'Donnell, Olson, Patterson, Quirk, Ridley Thomas, Rodriguez, Salas, Santiago, Steinorth, Stone, Thurman, Ting, Wagner, Waldron, Weber, Wilk, Williams, Wood, Mr. Speaker.
Members, please report to the floor. We have important business before this body today. Members, please report to the floor immediately. Members, a quorum is present. A quorum is present in the assembly. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. As part of the assembly observance of Cesar Chavez Day, the day's prayer will be offered by our guest chaplain, Father Francisco Hernandez. Fathers from the Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church here in Sacramento. Father.
Show me the struggle of the most miserable, so I will know my people's plight. Free me to pray for others, for you are present in every person. Help me to take responsibility for my own life, so that I can be free at last. Grant me courage to serve others, for in service there is true life. Give me honesty and patience, so that I can work with other workers. Bring forth song and celebration, so that the Spirit will be alive among us. Let the Spirit flourish and grow, so we will never tire of the struggle. Let us remember those who have died for justice, for they have given us life. Help us love even those who hate us, so we can change the world. Written by Cesar E. Chavez. Please allow me to say that now in Spanish. Enséñame el camino de los más desafortunados, así conoceré el dolor de mi pueblo. Libérame para orar por los demás, porque estás presente en cada persona. Ayúdame a tomar responsabilidad de mi propia vida. Solo así seré libre al fin. Concédeme valentía para servir al prójimo, porque en la entrega hay vida verdadera. Concédeme honradez y paciencia para que yo pueda trabajar junto con otros trabajadores. Alúmbranos con el canto y la celebración, para que el Espíritu viva entre nosotros. Que el Espíritu florezca y crezca, para que no nos cansemos ante la lucha. Que recordemos a los que han muerto por la justicia, porque a nosotros nos han entregado vida. Ayúdanos a amar aún a los que nos odian. Así podremos cambiar el mundo. Escrito por César E. Chávez.
Thank you, Father. We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Join Assembly Member Thurmond as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Thurmond.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, March 17, 2016. The Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Kevin Mullins, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dotson Wilson at the desk. Reading Clerk Kathleen M. Lewis reading.
Mr. Calderon moves and Ms. Waldron seconds. Now the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Moving to motions and resolutions, the absences for the day. For legislative business, Assembly members Bigelow, Grove, and Harper. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized for your procedural motion, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 118 and allow Assembly members Alejo, Hernandez, and Rodriguez to have guests and photographers on the floor today. Mr. Alejo and Hernandez's guests will be in the back of the chambers and at the rostrum for observance of Cesar Chavez Day.
Without objection, the request is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 and allow Assembly members Bloom, Brown, Cooley, Medina, and Weber to speak on an adjournment in memory today.
Without objection, that request is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer the following bills to committee. AB 1873 Holden from the Natural and Resources Committee and the Accountability Administrative Review Committee to the Housing and Community Development Committee and Accountability Administrative Review Committee. AB 2139 Williams from the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee to the Rules Committee. AB 2580 Olson from the Judiciary Committee to the Human Services Committee and then back to the Judiciary Committee. AB 2746 Olbernalty from the Transportation Committee to the Rules Committee. AB 2651 Gomez from the Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee to the Rules Committee. AB 2773 Quirk from the Utilities and Commerce Committee to the Rules Committee. AB 2844 Bloom from the Environmental Safety and Toxic Committee to the Rules Committee. AB 2867 Gatto from the Utilities and Commerce Committee to the Rules Committee. And AB 2497 Wagner from the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee to the Revenue and Taxation Committee and then back to the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee.
Without objection, such shall be the order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at the request of the author, please remove file item 41 ACR 146 Weber from the consent calendar.
The clerk will note.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 63 and allow Assemblymember Hernandez to take up SB 3 Leno without reference to file for the purpose of third reading.
Mr. Calderon, hold just 1 second, please. Members, we are going to return to that procedural item after we take up second reading. Second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2020, 1766, 2125 with amendments, 1703, 2053 with amendments, 2022 with amendments, Assembly Joint Resolution 29 with amendments, Assembly Bill 1900 with amendments, 2093 with amendments, 2349 with amendments, 2099 with amendments, 2346 with amendments, 1927, 2012, 2245, 1867 with amendments, 2159 with amendments, 2219 with amendments, 2027 with amendments, 1953, and Senate Bill 3.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Mr. Calderon, you are again recognized on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 63 and allow Assemblymember Hernandez to take up SB 3 Leno without reference to file for the purpose of third reading.
Thank you, Ms. Calderon. Ms. Waldron, for what purpose do you rise?
We object to the wharf and ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Ms. Waldron. Ms. Waldron is withholding unanimous consent. Members, this is a procedural vote. Mr. Calderon moves, and Mr. Cooper seconds that the rules be suspended. With that, the clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Ms. Waldron is asking for a no vote. This is a 40-vote item in a 79-member House on suspension of the rules. The clerk will close the roll. Ayes 46, noes 22. The rules are suspended. Members, we are going to move to the Assembly observance of Cesar Chavez Day. We are going to be taking up H.R. 42, which is file item 37. That's file item 37, H.R. 42. The clerk will read.
House Resolution 42 by Assemblymember Roger Hernandez relative to Cesar Chavez.
Mr. Hernandez, you may open on the resolution.
Mr. Speaker and members, I am honored to present H.R. 42, which proclaims March 31st, 2016 as Cesar Chavez Day. As most of us know, Cesar Chavez played an instrumental role in advocating for farm workers' rights and improving wages and working conditions across the state. We also know that Cesar did not lead this fight alone. His leadership team consisted most notably of Dolores Huerta and Larry Itliong. H.R. 42 provides the story of Cesar's life and many accomplishments, but most importantly, H.R. 42 is a tribute to Cesar's legacy about our human condition, our connection, and our struggle. Cesar taught us many things. He said our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others for their sake, and for our own. One of my favorite pictures of Cesar Chavez is by Octavio Ocampo, a Mexican surrealist painter titled Portrait of La Causa. I'm sure you've all seen this painting. It is a picture of Cesar with skulls on the left side, the fields in the back, and on the right side, images of people joining in the struggle for fairness and human dignity. The challenge Cesar left each of us is to stand together to push for a more just and compassionate society. These principles are not bound by political ideology. The lazos, the bonds that connect us to struggle, are always about the people.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Thurmond. Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. As chair of the Latino Caucus and serving in my last year in the Assembly, I want to rise once more to support this resolution that the Latino Caucus started many years ago when it fought to create the Cesar Chavez state holiday. I want to take a moment to pay respect to Cesar Chavez, who inspired so many farm workers and the children of farm workers throughout the state of California. As a child, I watched my own family struggle to make ends meet, working as migrant farm workers in the Salinas, Pajaro, and the Central Valleys. There was a time when migrant workers had no rest periods, they had no water and toilets in the fields, nor did they qualify for unemployment insurance when the season ended. But when Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta first came to Salinas and Watsonville in 1970, my grandparents were one of the first to join them in trying to organize for better conditions for farm workers all across the state of California. My own grandfather, Tomas Alejo, stood outside this very Capitol in the early 1970s with thousands of other farm workers to gain the first protections through these legislative halls. But there were many others. For example, while he was unable to join us here today, Jerry Cohen worked side by side with Cesar Chavez as its general counsel from 1967 to 1981, winning court battles that enhanced farm worker protections. Young lawyers back then, like Senator Bill Monning, joined him right out of law school. Another attorney, Mo Jourdain, with California Rural Legal Assistance, ended the use of the short-handled hoe known as El Cortito in 1968 because of the permanent damage that it caused to the backs of farm workers. But we all know that there's still much more work to do today, such as providing decent housing for our farm workers, making sure migrant children receive a quality education, passing in Washington, D.C. comprehensive immigration reform, and yes, even helping the 2.5 million lawful permanent resident immigrants in California to become voting U.S. citizens. Today we have many other heroes who are doing just that. People like Amagda Perez, the executive director of California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, that helped thousands of immigrants and farm workers become naturalized U.S. citizens. Or organizations like the UC Davis Immigration Law Clinic, where law students provide legal services without charge to our state's indigent rural communities and immigrant families which traditionally lack significant legal representation. And lastly, members, many of us wouldn't be here today if it wasn't the hard work of those courageous people who came here many years ago, fighting not only for just laws, but also so that the children and grandchildren of farm workers could have better opportunities. And it's only because of that sacrifice that people like me and Rob Bonta and many others are able to serve in these legislative chambers here today. With that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Ms. Gonzalez, you are recognized.
I rise today in support of this resolution, and something that is very meaningful to me. I am the daughter of a farm worker, somebody who came to this country and had the opportunity, because of his ability to work with his hands, backbreaking work, to provide a life for me and my brothers and my family here in the United States. But on Cesar Chavez Day, it's so important to remember the legacy of Cesar Chavez, because there is a reason we needed Cesar Chavez. There is a reason we continue to need protections for farm workers. If you think about the history of people who picked our fruits and vegetables and crops in this country, they started as slaves on plantations, and then they were sharecroppers, and then they were Filipino and Latino farm workers. And to this day, they've been excluded from national labor regulations and protections. To this day in California, it is the only group of workers who touch your food who still don't have the right to an 8-hour day, the hardest, most backbreaking work. And we expect them, that same work, once done by slaves, to be done by workers that somehow we've decided it's okay to exclude from common protections that we all enjoy in the state. Cesar Chavez did a lot for farm workers, but his legacy tells us that there's a lot more to do. And it is until that day when a farm worker, somebody who is making sure you have fresh fruits and vegetables on your plate, has the same protections as you and I, that we know that his legacy will be truly fulfilled. Happy Cesar Chavez Day.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Thurmond, you are recognized.